Okay, imagine this. You wake up, check your phone, there's a notification, you've won millions in the lottery. Life-changing, right. Well, just imagine that feeling. And then poof, it vanishes, maybe half an hour later. That actually happened to thousands of people in Norway just recently. It's a wild story. And it really opens up, well, a fascinating deep dive into something we often just assume works, government-run lotteries. So today, we're going to unpack this high-stakes world. We'll use this really dramatic Norwegian incident and also take a surprising look at a similar, maybe even more frustrating situation over in Connecticut. Our mission here is to pull out the key insights, about public trust, these persistent tech failures, and frankly, the complex ethics of state-sanctioned gambling.
Yeah, and what's really striking when you look at the sources, and we're talking news reports, regulatory analyses, even online chatter, is just how fast public trust can, well, disappear when these supposedly reliable systems mess up. The fallout, as we'll see, it goes way beyond just one technical glitch. It has ripples.
Okay, let's dive right into Norway then. The Euro jackpot blunder. This was Friday, June 27th, 2025. Norsk Tipping, that's Norway's state-owned gambling company, they had this just staggering data fault. Basically, when they were converting Euro prizes into Norwegian kroner, NOK, the system somehow multiplied by 100 instead of dividing by 100.
Which is, think about that. It inflated the winnings by a factor of 10,000? Just incredible.
The numbers are pretty wild, like you said. Around 16,000 Norwegians got these big win messages on their apps, SMS. Reported wins were anywhere from 1 million NOK up to 13 million NOK. Now, just for context, 1 million NOK is, less than 100,000 US?
Right, but 13 million NOK, that's getting closer to 1.3 million US.
Yeah,
Still a year, man.
definitely. And get this, in a few extreme cases, 3 people were shown winnings of 72 billion NOK. That's like 7.2 billion US dollars.
Unbelievable. Just imagine seeing that number flash up.
Right. And the emotional impact. Well, you can guess. The sources talk about extreme disappointment and feeling of loss, even though the money wasn't really theirs to begin with. We heard stories, people immediately looking up car prices online.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, or even calling their bosses to tell them how they really feel. Some might have been jokes, but apparently some rude resignations actually happened, or people quit jobs.
It's that roller coaster, isn't it? That huge high, then the crash.
Exactly. And the sources do mention the potential for real emotional distress. Someone even worried about suicides, though, to be clear, the data doesn't link suicides directly to this event, but the psychological impact is undeniable.
And what makes this even more interesting, or maybe more damaging, is the context of trust. Norsk Tipping isn't some fly-by-night operation. It's government-owned. People see it as extremely reliable and trustworthy.
Which, ironically, made it harder for people to spot the mistake immediately.
Precisely. They trusted the notification because they trusted the source. That implicit trust was sky high.
So what was the fallout? The accountability must have been intense.
Oh, it was swift. The CEO, Tonje Sagstuen, she resigned the very next day, Saturday, June 28th. She said point blank, "Here, things have failed in several places. This is my responsibility." Called it a breach of trust.
Wow. Taking responsibility like that.
Yes, though it's worth noting, she's getting 6 months severance. Her salary was around 3.7 million NOK, about $370,000 US. And the government reaction was strong too. The Minister of Culture and Equality, Lubna Jaffrey, said flat out, such mistakes should not happen. Especially, given Norsk Tipping has a monopoly.
Right, they have exclusive rights.
Exactly. And the head of the gambling authority, Adel Hamar, basically said the CEO resigning isn't enough. Trust must be rebuilt over time.
That implies this wasn't the first problem, maybe. Was this an isolated mess-up?
Unfortunately, no. This was actually Norsk Tipping's third regulatory breach in less than a year.
Third. Wow.
Yeah. Think about that. There was a mistaken payout of 25 million NOK on an online casino game before this. And they also got hit with a 36 million NOK fine because their self-exclusion system for problem gamblers failed.
Okay, so there's a pattern here. It's not just one bad day.
It definitely points to deeper systemic issues. And because of this, they're drafting new regulations now.
Yeah.
Mandatory independent testing is one thing being pushed, trying to prevent this kind of thing again.
It really shows how fragile these systems can be, even when they're state-backed and supposed to be foolproof.
Absolutely. Which kind of brings us to the broader picture, doesn't it?
It really does. These incidents, Norway and others, they teach us some hard lessons about compliance, accountability, and just the sheer difficulty of running these massive state-controlled systems.
Exactly. You see just how critical strict compliance is in this industry. It's not optional. Getting licenses, using audited random number generators, having rock-solid cybersecurity, protecting data privacy. These are baseline requirements. And when things go wrong, like in Norway, the consequences are severe. Big fines, maybe getting shut down, potentially even criminal charges.
And like we hinted, this isn't just a European issue. The situation in Connecticut, it's a different kind of failure, but just as revealing, maybe even more frustrating for taxpayers there. Let's pivot to that. Back in 2021, Connecticut legalized online gaming and cannabis. Part of that was launching an iLottery, and the projections were pretty rosy. They expected, $2-3 million in the first couple of years, growing to maybe $19 million by 2026.
Yeah, and that money was specifically earmarked for something important.
Right, a debt-free community college program. They planned on $14 million a year going to that, starting in 2024. A really specific promise.
Okay, so that's the plan. What happened?
Well, here's the stark reality. As of May 2024, that's over 3 years after legalization, the Connecticut iLottery system has generated exactly zero revenue.
Zero. After 3 years.
Not a dime. And because that money never materialized, the state had to step in and use $15 million a year from its general fund to cover the community college promise.
So what went wrong? Why the delay?
It seems a huge part of the problem lies with the vendor, International Game Technology, IGT. They're one of the biggest lottery system providers in the world.
You'd think they'd have it figured out.
You would, but they apparently struggled to meet Connecticut's regulations, which were described as rigorous and rigid. We're talking geo-fencing, making sure only people in Connecticut can play online, plus independent testing, encryption, account management, all the stuff to prevent underage gambling or play by excluded individuals.
And those regulations sound necessary.
Yeah.
Especially for a state-run program.
Absolutely necessary, but incredibly complex to implement perfectly. The sources say even small regulatory tweaks could push launch dates back 6 to 8 weeks because of all the retesting required.
Wow. So bureaucratic hurdles, essentially.
Partly. Art Mongillo, who's the public affairs manager for CT Lottery, basically admitted it's a lot easier to say it than to execute. And on top of the iLottery delays, the new central system IGT provided for the regular lottery also had technical glitches. It was sending confusing messages to people about winning or losing.
Oh, that's not good. More confusion.
And get this. As of December 2023, only 38 out of 168 of their self-serve lotto kiosks were even working properly.
That's barely functional.
Exactly. So now the state's Department of Consumer Protection is investigating IGT. They're looking into maybe recouping lost revenue, hitting them with penalties for non-performance.
It sounds like systemic problems there too then. Not just the iLottery. Yeah, Holly Cheeseman, she's a Republican on the finance committee there. She called the Lottery Corporation's tech issues endemic. That's a strong word. And Mongillo, the lottery spokesperson, he even suggested that communication gaps between IGT and the regulators, the DCP, made the delays worse. Said it was pretty par for the course with the regulatory complexity and lack of communication.
So it's the vendor, the regulations, maybe communication?
And maybe government capacity itself. Think about it. Since 2021, Connecticut's Department of Consumer Protection, the DCP, they got handed responsibility for legalized marijuana, liquor rules, and online gambling. All at once. Their budget went up significantly from $25 million in 2021 to almost $37 million in 2023, but still. It raises questions about whether state agencies can efficiently handle so many complex rollouts simultaneously.
That's a really critical point. Overload, maybe. And it's not like these kinds of massive public disappointments are new either. You mentioned ripples earlier. I mean, think back to the Pepsi number fever thing in the Philippines in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, the bottle caps.
Exactly. Hundreds of thousands of people thought they won huge prizes because of a printing error, caused riots, boycotts, a total mess when Pepsi couldn't pay up.
A corporate version of the lottery glitch.
Kind of. And even today, you see lawsuits in the U.S., people suing state lotteries over tickets they thought were winners, but the lottery says, nope, printing error or negligence, breach of contract. The stakes are always incredibly high when perceived winnings vanish. So, okay, we've seen the glitches, the delays, the broken trust. What does this all mean for us as citizens, as consumers? This deep dive really pushes us into those fundamental ethical questions about state-run lotteries.
It really does. And it brings up that classic debate. Are lotteries basically a tax on the poor? Critics argue pretty forcefully that lotteries tend to exploit people who are maybe financially or emotionally vulnerable, lower income folks who might be more drawn to that false hope of a big win.
Is there data on that?
There is. Studies consistently show that lower-income players often spend a much larger percentage of their income on tickets. Like, a South Carolina study found they spent double the proportion compared to higher-income players. A Massachusetts study found 40% of all lottery sales came from just the top 10% of players, who were spending an average of $200 a week.
$200 a week? Wow, that's significant.
It is. But then you have the counter-argument.
The individual responsibility argument.
Exactly. Supporters say that viewing it as purely exploitative strips individuals of agency. They argue players are adults, they should know the odds, exercise fiscal responsibility. It's just a game, right? Some would even say it's naive to expect everyone to always behave rationally with money. People make choices.
And it's happening alongside this broader trend, isn't it? Gambling just seems more normalized now. Online sports betting is everywhere. Slot machines, pokies in Australia, fruities in the UK, they're in pubs, corner stores sometimes.
Yeah, the accessibility has exploded,
Yeah.
which leads to the core societal dilemma. Look, lotteries bring in huge amounts of revenue for governments.
Yeah.
That money funds real things, senior services in Pennsylvania, that debt-free college plan in Connecticut, theoretically, creates jobs too.
And some argue regulating it keeps the money out of the hands of, say, criminal organizations. Better the state gets it than the mob.
That's the argument. But it forces that tough question. Does the public revenue, the jobs, the regulation benefit, does it outweigh the potential harm? The harm from problem gambling, the fact that it hits lower-income communities harder, it's a tricky balancing act for any government involved.
It really forces us as citizens to be informed, doesn't it? To really look at the full picture of what government policies and actions mean for people's lives, financially and emotionally. So recapping this deep dive, we've really wrestled with this core tension. The promise of lotteries funding public good versus the reality of, well, human error, tech failures, complex regulations, and these persistent ethical questions.
Yeah, and what stands out is the absolute need for robust, transparent systems, especially when it's the state running the show. Their entire model is fundamentally based on trust.
Mhm.
These incidents, Norway, Connecticut, they're stark reminders that we need constant vigilance, constant critical thinking, especially as everything gets more digital and more regulated.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. When governments get into businesses like gambling, trying to fund public services, where do we draw the line? The line between raising needed revenue and maybe, just maybe, fostering a reliance on luck. And what's the real cost when those systems break down? Not just the financial cost, but the cost to public confidence, to individual hope and well-being. We hope this deep dive gives you even more to think about.